Welcome to the Mystery of Life. I'm Jo.
And I'm Jonny.
And today we're asking, is there treasure on Oak Island? Now, this isn't just big, it's kind of massive. The question of treasure on Oak Island has like books and TV shows and literally many, many seasons of TV shows dedicated to looking at what's happening there. So I don't intend to replace all of those shows with a couple of hours on this, and there will definitely be things that I'll be sort of missing out. So if you already know the story, yes, I have cut some bits. I plan on giving you a bit of a summary. We can share our views on it. And then in the blog, I'll suggest some like further reading and listening if you want to learn a bit more. Also, all the very early stuff, everyone sort of agrees the fact that like one person says one thing, one person says another. So if you're hearing me say something you've not heard before, that's just because that's another opinion out there. And I'm guessing most of you have at least heard of Oak Island, even if you don't follow it yourself. It's an island where people have spent literally hundreds of years looking for buried treasure that no one can really decide whether or not it exists. And you're very into the idea of hidden treasure in general, aren't you?
I like the mystery of it all, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, there's definitely treasure there.
Not just Oak Island, you like treasure shows in general.
I like the idea of treasure hunting in general. I like the mystery of it.
I feel like if we had enough money, you'd be a treasure hunter.
Probably not. Sounds like a lot of effort.
Okay. Well, Oak Island then. Now, it is a real island, and it has a little bridge connecting it to the mainland, a causeway, that was actually built so they could get heavy machinery over there to look for treasure. It's off the shore of Nova Scotia. It's completely privately owned, and it's about 140 acres in size, which is 1.6 kilometres long and 0.8 kilometres wide. I thought that was actually really small.
Yeah, it is. It's tiny.
It is, yeah. I mean, you can like walk from one side to the other of it. It's a lot smaller than I imagined, and it's very foresty.
Yeah, after 100 years, I don't know why they haven't just bulldozed the fucking place and just dug the whole thing out.
Oh, I actually know the answer to that. Licensing.
Oh, of course.
Or how do we make a TV show last 10 seasons?
Yeah, there's probably that as well.
But I did wonder, given its size, like why haven't we found something if it's there? Because like there is only that many places it can be.
Again, I think this ties into your spatial awareness issues and scale. Because on ground, that's quite a small island. But if you then like add the dimension of down, that's a very large area to search.
Yeah, they have hit bedrock a couple of times, so it's not as if they haven't gone down far.
Oh no, yeah, it is an undertaking what they're doing. But it begs, like, they're finding it so hard with modern machinery, yet a bunch of pirates are supposed to have set this all up.
So,
but I suppose setting the trap's a lot easier than...
Well, let's get on to that. The legend, the story, if you will. I'll come back to the big holes they've dug. Fear not, I've got things to say about that. And they've also done a lot of what I found quite interesting studies on geology and the ecology and the animals that live there. I'll put a bit more about that on the blog because it's not really relevant to this story, but I thought it was cool. So... Right, so apparently it was early European settlers. Is that a nice way of saying the British?
Or Spanish. Could be either.
Well, apparently it was them that started this rumour. And no one really knows exactly where it came from, but it was said that some sort of notorious pirate confessed on his deathbed to having buried treasure there. And who it was seems to change. Captain Kidd gets a lot of airtime. They do think it was most likely to be him if this was true on the pirate side. But there's also been talk of like Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, like a whole bunch of other people. But apparently, whoever this was, apparently because he was a pirate, he couldn't recover it himself or he'd be arrested for being a pirate. And it was supposed to be about £2 million. Now, as the story goes, there was a boy called Daniel McInnes, who, by the way, no one can even really agree on how his name is spelt or his age. Some say he was 10, others say he was 16, others say he was a farmer, a 30-year-old farmer looking for farmland on the island. Nothing was documented, so I don't know how we know about this. It's all just word of mouth. Now, it's 1795, and Daniel, he notices an area of depressed grass or, like, depressed land, and what appears to be part of an old pulley system. He had heard the local rumours and decides to start digging. He got a couple of friends to help him, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, and they dug down 3 metres. Now, if you believe he's a child, I start to struggle with this.
Why?
Because that's quite a lot. They keep going. He doesn't stop at 3 metres. But, like, that's quite a big hole. Like, you're getting tired after that.
I used to dig quite big holes.
Okay, well, he goes another 3 meters down.
And don't forget that A, they haven't got Xboxes, and B, this person could either be 10 or 30. So.
Yeah, but even if he's a grown man, I've still got like reservations.
No,
about how
people
far
used
they
to
get
dig.
down.
That's how they got holes. There was no like excavators. They
Yeah, but
just
they
dug.
didn't even like. As far as we know, he might not have even had a ladder. Like you got to assume he's got a ladder. But like moving around on like loose earth is difficult. Like how are you gonna get back out?
Well, yeah, but I think
people getting stuck in
I think,
wells.
I think
was a
we're
thing.
gonna. I think later on we're gonna come to the dangers of this escapade. So.
Well, another 3 meters down, and they find a platform of oak logs. And apparently, this appears to be some sort of filled-in shaft, and the oak logs are decaying. So this is not natural, and was a sure sign it was built by humans. They see this as a good sign. They remove the logs, and they carry on digging down. Now, I did question this, and apparently, no, there really isn't. It's very unlikely that it was natural. But at first, I was like, well, what? Like a log in the ground? Is that really that weird?
Well, laid out in a way to create a platform is.
Yeah, but what if it was like a tree that fell?
Into a neat pile of evenly stacked logs.
Yeah, I mean, I concede. It seems weird, okay? So another 3 meters down, they find another platform. Another 3 meters, there's another platform. Apparently, because it wasn't documented, it could have been like 2 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, so on. But we're going with the 3 meters thing. And they're about 30 odd feet down this hole when they realise they need some help. This is a big hole now.
Well, yeah, and I'd like to say, like, boys will be boys. That is the kind of thing boys do, is get down the hole 30 foot deep and then think, we need some help.
Well, they asked the townspeople for help, but no one's interested. Now, there's a lot of reasons people think they might not be interested. Some people think that they might have like dug before and realised there was nothing there. Some people think that they might have heard the legends of the curse, which I'll come to in a bit, and maybe there was some sort of paranormal shit going on. And people were scared to dig and look for it. And other people think it might simply just have been that in those times, people were just really, really busy and had to like farm all day to make their money.
Yeah, it's either going to be, I don't have time for this, or I don't believe these people.
It's like the people that dig a big hole at the beach. I've never been into that.
Oh, I so was. I've nearly ended up in China so many times.
Even if you didn't believe there was treasure at the end. What's the point in digging a hole for no reason?
The achievement of it all.
Okay. Anyway, they give up. They can't get anyone to help. I guess they realise they can't go any further without help. So that's the end of that. I've got a few points to address with this story. Exactly what you said. First of all, the pirate thing. Later on, new theories do come about as to where all this treasure might have come from. But let's say we go with the pirate thing. Exactly what you said. They're struggling to find it now with all this like modern day machinery. Are we really believing that a pirate's gone to this much effort? Was it not just like dig it a little bit, stash it in the ground and off you go? Like they're like 30 odd foot down at this point.
I do feel that this is somewhat elaborate. I'll give you that. But I do think they did go to quite a lot of lengths. Because they're protecting 2 million, not 200 quid. You know, you don't want someone just stumbling across it or stealing it from you while you try and work out how to take it without being caught.
Mm.
If they didn't want to go and get it because they were worried they'd get caught,
yeah, what's the point in burying it in the first
surely
place?
they knew then there's someone who knows whose money that, or knows that where that money, like that money's on that island at some point to catch them. It's pretty easy at those days to do stuff without being caught.
Yeah.
They buried it without being caught.
Yeah, exactly. And that must have taken a fair time because you've got to bury it and then get back.
So I don't know what the story is there. That I suppose it's going to be they were being chased. They hid in the cove and decided to dump the money and run. Because obviously that kind of like weight of, because it's not just notes or Bitcoin or, you know, an NFT.
No, you have to assume it's gold.
It's heavy, heavy stuff. So if you're being chased, you need to get rid of that. And being caught with a load of money isn't exactly helpful.
Yeah.
They're just going to take it and kill you.
Okay, well, so they give up and that was that for a time. Now, in 1802, the Onslow Company arrive and they start digging, continuing first with the original hole. Supposedly, this Onslow Company included John Smith, Anthony Vaughan, and Daniel McInnes, although I'm not immediately clear as to whose idea it was first or what have you, but they all ended up there at a time. And they recruit locals, this time with an offer of pay. So it's amazing what you can do when you offer to pay someone. And they dig. And this time they get it down to about 90 odd feet. And they found the platforms, each sort of 10 feet or so. And they do find some stuff. So they find charcoal, which, I mean, I wasn't all that surprised about, but apparently is not normal for this island this far down.
Well, no, charcoal's not normal just to be in the ground.
Oh, really?
Charcoal was burnt wood, so it needs to have been burnt.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's weird. And they find this, like, bluish putty, but apparently they didn't find that odd. They recognised this putty because it was used in sort of maritime and boat work. and it wasn't a shock to see it, but it was a surprise to find it underground, because it's obviously not a naturally, you don't dig it up to use it, but they knew what it was. And then they find a layer of coconut fibre, and apparently this is like super unusual because the nearest natural coconut fibres were thousands of miles away, and it definitely wasn't local, really shouldn't have been there. But again, they recognised what it was. Apparently they used it in boats to stop cargo rolling about, a bit like packing. So it kind of wasn't all that weird that it might have been near treasure.
No, and they're going to use they'll even use bits of their ship if they need to.
Yeah, and there is some discrepancy as to what order they find this stuff in. But again, I don't know how much really that matters. You've found it. Like, I don't know, that it's not supposed to be there. So
I've never had this thought before, though.
Right.
But they've gone to a lot of effort to hide this treasure just to leave the block and tackle hanging above it.
Yeah. I suppose you've got to have some sort of X marks the spot, haven't you?
That's a pretty obvious one, though, isn't it? Like, you could logic your way to there being stuff below you.
Also, though, if it was that obvious that this, please dig here type thing, then why did no one think to dig there before Daniel?
Well, I heard a story that he saw lights over in that area, and that's what compelled him to go over there in the first place.
I did see that. The common one seems to be the whole, hanging the tackle up thing. But then this is where, then the story of, was he there looking for farmland? It's like, I don't know.
He was there.
He was there. He got a shovel and he started digging. Well, so they're about 90 foot down, and then they find the stone. Now, this is now often referred to as the 90-foot stone, because, it was found 90 foot into the ground.
Nothing about the naming of anything in this is imaginative.
No. And the size of the stone gets reported differently, and everyone kind of acknowledges that the exact size can't be agreed on. But it was fairly large. It's generally agreed to have been somewhere between 2 to 3 inches by 12 to 16 inches. And this stone is supposedly quite hard, harder than other stones in the area. And it has an olivey colour to it. And it has symbols on it. Not so much letters as symbols. I don't know what it meant. They couldn't decipher it. So it was actually much later that it was decoded to have said. And these were when I say symbols, they were more they were exactly that, weren't they? They were like squares and dots and circles and things. It was a code, essentially, if you believe it. And it was later decoded to say 40 foot below, £2 million are buried. And some people think it actually said 10 feet below, £2 million are buried. There have been other decoding attempts since. Some people even think it might be double coded, and that it tells you how to get to the treasure. Which is not easy, by the way, which I'm leading to. But that was in 1804. They didn't know what it meant, so I guess they just sort of looked at it and thought, right, let's carry on.
I've always thought that, again, they've gone to a lot of effort to hide this, and they know where it is. And if you've got 90 feet down this hole with all the wooden platforms, I don't think now's the time you need a stone saying, yep, treasure's there.
And writing a code.
In a code. Yeah. So I've always felt that it's more likely that there was never treasure there.
Plus, they reckon that most pirates couldn't read or write. So I don't think they'd be making elaborate codes.
Pirate captains probably were more likely to be able to read and write.
Yeah, but
not many of the thickos made it to captain. They're all captains of the Navy and stuff.
Still, they weren't necessarily
Not necessarily, but there could have been one that... There was definitely pirates that could write.
Mm.
And this could have been one of them.
Well, you might be wondering, let's have a look at the stone and see if we can work it out. But I was shocked to find that one of the most important pieces of evidence they've got, we don't know where the stone is.
Well, I think for a long time it was all in-house small town stuff, so it never really it's not like it ended up in the Smithsonian and we've lost it. It was in someone's basement.
Yeah, apparently it spent time at someone's house, a member of the Smith family. People would go and look at it, so it was of local interest. And there was rumours that it was sold or claimed in some way. And there was the idea that it was built into a chimney in someone's house at some point before somebody dug it out. And then it was removed and it was on display again, and more people would go and look at it. Apparently it fell into the hands of a bookbinder. Because, of course, and at one point they used it to beat leather for the books, and so the characters wore off, and now it's just a stone.
I mean, that's a pretty good way of adding to the legend and being able to explain the lack of writing on a rock. Don't have to come up with a cipher now.
Well, apparently, when it was translated and deciphered, that was based off what people remembered when they saw it.
I mean, that's just crazy. You can't decipher a code off what people remember, because that's not going to be right.
No,
people can't.
There's so many issues with that. You've got to believe that people saw the right thing, and then you've got to believe that you've decoded it correctly.
Yeah, I've never bought into the stone thing. I think if anything, that tunnel, or is it a tunnel if it goes straight down? Hole.
Pit. I
pit.
suppose is what they're referring to it as, isn't it?
They do call it the money pit. That whole area, I think, is a big red herring. I don't think if you're going to hide it with booby traps, you're going to put a nice inviting stone telling you where the treasure is. I think you're going to put a nice inviting stone that makes people think the treasure's there, and it sets off a trap. Does that not make more logical sense than, like, you're going to leave a clue, like, oh, look, there's a block and tackle up there. Maybe someone dug a hole. Oh, you've gone for look, 10 feet below you is treasure. And then that's when you set off the booby traps.
Maybe someone
I know
did.
this story, and I know what happens after they find the stone. They set off the booby traps.
But maybe someone did leave, like, like you had the old, like, treasure maps and stuff. Maybe this was someone's idea of fun.
Nah. No, 2 million. He wasn't starting some weird pre-TV game show.
Okay, well, I'm attempting like a rough timeline here, so I'm going to come back to the stone because they think they might have found it in more modern times. But back to 1804, they don't know what it says, so they just plough on down. And once they'd lifted the stone, they noticed a little bit of water coming in. And apparently for every 2 buckets of mud, and that was something else that was surprised me. I didn't even think about that. Like when they're so far down this pit, they're hoisting the mud back up in buckets.
Yeah.
That's just mad. That must have took forever.
Yeah, that's how people dig holes.
So
it's the reality of life without technology.
I guess I hadn't really thought that much about hole digging before this episode.
I mean, it hasn't changed much other than the machinery, but even that can only reach a certain point.
Well, yeah, apparently they weren't all that concerned about it. So 2 buckets of mud, 1 bucket of water. They dug a little bit more. They're not far under the stone, and then they hit something hard. And they couldn't get through it, and they were all sure this was their payday. They were sure that they were going to find a way in. They were going to crack into this hard thing, and they were going to find the treasure. That was it. But instead of doing it there and then, they're like, right, we're going to pack up for the night, and we're going to come back on Monday, and we're going to be rich. We're going to get our treasure.
Why would you do that?
I know, right? You're so close. You spent 2 years, like, especially if you're Daniel, who's been like, started digging like 8 years ago now. Like, what's another couple of hours? Find a way in, see what's there. I can't believe it. And apparently it was like not necessarily the next morning. I don't know. I've read reports about it being like the weekend, but did they really care about that? I can't imagine they did.
No, I can't imagine they did either.
Although religion was obviously a thing, and Sunday really was a day of rest. So it might have been that
but
they
I
did
still
have Sunday
think
off.
that greed would have overcome that.
Yeah, exactly. But whatever, even if it was the next morning, they go home that night because they're like, right, we're going to open it up in the morning. And when they come back, their big hole has filled up with about 60 foot of water. It's flooded, gone.
Well, yeah, they did like 1 bucket of water. They weren't taking water out. So if they leave it, that water, like, you don't go away and the water stops coming out.
Right.
That's pretty shitty on them. That's stupid on their part. They needed to at least like have people emptying the water. They just made a well, is what they made.
Oh, it's madness. So, no, but in fairness, then they do try hard to get this water out. Obviously, there's a lot of buckets involved. They try really hard to get this water out, but it just keeps coming back. Apparently, there's a guy with a steam-powered pump, which is like really exciting at some point, but that even breaks. They just cannot get this water out, and they can't understand at this point where it's coming from either. So eventually, they decide to start a new tunnel. And the thought is that the idea of this, they dig it to the side a bit. Again, reports vary as to how far. Some people say about 14 feet to the side of the original tunnel. And it's thought that their idea was to tunnel down and then like under and up rather than just across, although both theories have been put forward as to what they might have been trying to achieve. But the one that makes sense is, yeah, I get it. You tunnel down and you go up to the treasure rather than trying to get rid of all this water. It does sort of make sense in your head, doesn't it?
Yeah, you got to find an alternate route unless you're going to invent scuba equipment pretty quick.
But then that floods too. So not immediately, but at some point someone figures out that it's actually the water seems to rise and fall with the tide. And then someone apparently realises that it's salt water. And I feel like surely that could have been realised a lot sooner. But anyway.
Well, you taste the random water.
I know, but like this is their thing. This is what they're doing. They're like trying to get this water out and digging this hole. And I don't know. But it's not long before they get fed up and they give up. And that's the end of their dig. But it's not the end of the story. Not by far.
No, they don't know what kind of worms they've opened.
No. So ownership of the island changes hands numerous times. And who is in charge of digging also changes. There was 18 companies searching for the treasure at one time or another from this company up until the current owners bought it or started digging in 2006/7. And in 1848/49, when the Truro company start digging, they re-excavate earlier holes and the same thing happens to them. Dig, flood, dig, flood. They try new holes. Same thing happens again. It's like they can't, no one seems to realise that this is not the way. So they do dig boreholes as well, and they're the first ones to send down an auger, which apparently just drills through the layers and it brings back up samples. And they get layers of oak, metal pieces, and coconut fibres. So again, they're finding stuff that shouldn't really be in the ground. They're confident that there's something there, but they can't find a way to stop these holes filling up with water. Over the years, people do report things like seeing pick marks and obvious like man-made things and marks, and the way that, like you said, logs don't tend to fall horizontally into tunnels or pits. So they're all kind of like confident that there's something going on. But I have to wonder, at what point do people start realising that maybe some of this stuff might have been caused by previous treasure hunters?
Yeah, that is always the risk. You're coming into debris of hunters and not debris of putters.
Yeah, they do find quite a lot of stuff, to be honest, although not the treasure. Spoiler alert, we haven't found the treasure. And I'm going to do a bit of a list of some of the more interesting things in a minute. Over the years, they do experiments with dye and paint to see where the water is coming from. And they do figure out that it's coming from the sea, after a fashion. And they move the dig sites around quite a bit, most notably to an area that they now call Smith's Cove, where they discover a series of flood tunnels and box drains.
The infamous box drains that have never been seen again.
Which is weird, right? Now, it took me, I was looking at these and writing about these for a while before I realised that we don't know where they are now. How have we lost something so complex?
It is weird, but uncovering them was a monumental task.
Let me explain. So I'll put some pictures of this on the blog, but it's basically like in the Smith's Cove area is like the shore. So it's like the beach, as it were. And it's like a kind of tunnel from the mainland to the shore, and then it kind of forks out into like, I think it was like 4 or 5 like sections. And supposedly they can't be natural. They have to be man-made. They're fairly complex kind of filtration systems, or at least complex for what would have been the time, with big stones and then smaller stones on top of them and a lot of coconut fibres. So it's like, it is weird. And I was like, okay, great. Well, this is like a huge thing then. And then, yeah, we don't know where they are. Like, how have we lost them? If we know they're in Smith's Cove, surely that's something that would have been quite easy to have found again.
Yeah, but the way they were found was they actually built a massive temporary wall that stopped all the water going into Smith's Cove, and they drained it and were able to get to the very bottom and excavate. No one's ever really achieved that since. And although there was photos taken and stuff, at some point it was allowed to fill back in. So they know where they're supposed to find these alleged tunnels, but getting to them is the endeavour, not finding them as such.
Yeah, they are still looking for them. And there is an episode on one of the TV shows now, which, we'll get to in a bit, where they do think they've found bits of them. But it's madness to me that something so big we can't find. I get what you're saying, and that it's a huge undertaking, but if they found them back then, it's mad that we can't find them now, given the money and equipment that they've got currently trying to find stuff on this island.
Other than making it easier, their equipment's no more advanced, and it's more now just more and more expensive and health and safety conscious to do these endeavours, and there's all these legal things about what they can and can't do and use on the island. And
well, I fell down a bit of a Reddit black hole with this part of it because I really couldn't get my head around the fact that we've lost them. And as usual, people are rowing for, one side or the other, depending on what you believe. But there were quite a lot of people that believed that this could be explained by the geology of the island. And apparently, and I'm not scientific enough to know if they're right, but they made it sound like they were. And they were saying that the whole like rocks and fibre layers thing, if it actually existed, might have been something else entirely as well. It might not have been natural, but it also might not have been box drains either. It could have been something like man-made for drying out salt or fish or something else, just like some other kind of, it might not have been anything to do with any treasure.
No, and to me that sounds like the start of an island-wide irrigation system more than anything, because getting water inland would be more effort. There's certainly no evidence that they're in any way linked to treasure other than there was seawater in the tunnel and these are tunnels in the sea.
So we don't actually know where these are or even if they are, because again, you're just taking somebody's word for it, really.
There is photos, I think.
Yeah, but they're very like...
They are...
You don't really know what you're looking at.
They're very unclear.
Yeah.
Wasn't the digital age, unfortunately.
No, and some people even question some of the evidence they did find back then because there wasn't as much money in it then as there is now, and they might have been trying to entice investors into putting more money into their hunt so that they could keep looking.
Yeah, that's another thing. You're trusting the word of treasure hunters, who are a notoriously naughty bunch.
So over the years, the digs continued. They filled in the old pits and dug new ones and then reopened the old ones. And there was lots of flooding, and there were lots of stories of platforms caving in and sinking further into the ground before the pit was eventually filled in. There was also a vault at some point that they believed was discovered. They call it the Chapel Vault, named after the guy that was supposedly the one that found it. And supposedly that was a kind of wooden vault with a hard casing that they thought might be limestone. And they thought that in there might have been the treasure. But at some point, something happened to that when they were digging, and that kind of got pulled further into the ground. That sank down, and now they don't know where that is. So, and again, I watched an episode of The Curse of Oak Island where they thought they'd found it. They thought they were drilling into the side of it because they brought up some rock and some wood that was like the wrong way round. I don't know. But then that was the end of that. We haven't found it.
No. They always just find a little bit of rock and wood. That's all they ever find from these millions of pounds worth of drilling. Credit to them for staying sane throughout all this, for the Curse of Oak Island people. They've done it for so long, for so little.
So little, you don't think the History Channel's paying them?
No, I meant reward in terms of finding stuff. Like, I would have given up. There's nothing there to really, sorry guys, make me stay.
Well, in 1909, Franklin Roosevelt got involved. Now, this was 30 odd years before his presidency, but still, people are interested. Like, this has become quite a big deal. And people keep looking, holes keep flooding. I am kind of glossing over some bits here because honestly, I feel like this is just like all you need to know. Over the years, a lot of people look for it and a lot of flooding happens.
Yeah, they dig in various places and it floods.
Yeah. I'll put a little bit more of a timeline on the blog, but for purposes of the story I'm telling you here, that really is genuinely all you need to know. Bringing us up to 1965, a 656-metre causeway was built so that the crane could come across. That's still there. That's what's used today to get to the island, but it was done purely to bring across all the big machinery. Another note that in 1969, the Triton Alliance actually get down to 235 metres. The thing is, every time they just give up because the holes get filled in and then it's flooded again, but that just creates more and more problems for the next person because apparently, and I'm not a digger, as you might have gathered, but apparently digging a hole that's already been dug potentially several times, is more difficult or dangerous than digging a hole fresh.
Yeah, it's less consistent, less compacted, so it's a lot more dangerous to dig. You can have more cavings. You don't know how wide they dug their hole.
It's softer, apparently.
Yeah.
In 1970, cameras go down a big hole, and the footage or the photos is very grainy. Personally, I don't think that you can see these things, but they seem to think that you can see a treasure chest and human remains.
I've seen this, and it's like one of those things where you're looking at it like, yes.
Yeah, I said this to you earlier, didn't I? They were looking at a rock, which I will actually come to rocks shortly, but and they were like, oh, here's an eye and here's a nose, and it's like you do that with clouds. Like you look up at the cloud and you're like, oh, and as soon as someone says it, you can see it. So it's like if you're saying this is a human skull and this is a treasure chest, it's like, sure, okay, maybe that could be a human skull and a treasure chest, but really it's just a blob.
Yeah, I think the only thing that lends any credence to that is the fact that it is a historian looking at it and going, I think that it isn't just them. They do get people in. So although you can't necessarily believe that it's definitely that, I think it does give more credibility because that's what there's a lot of things that historians look at and I go, yeah, okay, all right, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it is more credible. It's in the more modern digs because they did keep records and write a bit more down and, have sort of so-called experts look at them. Whereas before, when this started, it really was just free guys. And even the first couple of professional companies, as it were, still didn't keep very good records because they didn't, I suppose in a lot of ways, they probably didn't think that people would still be looking for it 100 years later. They didn't see the point.
No, and treasure hunters are a funny breed, again, that I don't think they're going to willingly share too much information with too many people outside. Like, obviously now the TV show's a bit different, but I think historically treasure hunters haven't exactly put their information into the public domain.
Over the years, divers have gone down, and they do in the TV show, in the modern owners as well, which I'll come to in a minute. We're nearly there. But they do report that they can see things like a human skull or a human hand. We don't have these things, so it's like, okay, great, you think you saw it, but still doesn't mean anything, does it?
Yeah, but many searchers have died.
Well, yes, it could well be a human hand, but it still doesn't mean anything, like you say, does it? Because it could be just someone that died in the 1800s.
One thing they're not saying is I see treasure. Shit tons of treasure that make this all worth it.
So Rick and Marty Lagina, they are brothers. They are millionaires, or at least combined they are. One of them actually used to be a postman. And they were inspired by a 1965 article in Reader's Digest. And it actually seems like a lot of people were inspired by this article. There is an archive copy of the original, which I'll link to in the blog this week. And their life dream was to find the treasure. So he sells his energy company.
He hasn't sold it all.
Shares enough. They have shares in it, yes, but they sold the majority. He's not running it anymore. He's on the island doing that.
Yeah, for the summer.
But yes, that's the other thing. This is a seasonal search, I should mention.
That sounds ridiculous, but they're in a place where the land freezes. It becomes impossible to dig. They just have to pack up for winter.
So they buy a 50% majority share in Oak Island Tours, who owns the island at the time. This then obviously makes them majority owners. This was in 2006, and in 2014, the History Channel started the TV show The Curse of Oak Island, and that is still airing today. We are more than 140 episodes. There's new episodes coming out soon.
Yeah, it's amazing how little happens. It is my people in the cabin talking about their emotions. It's
cute.
Yeah, and I enjoy watching their excitement and their passion for it.
I was watching an episode earlier where they found a button, and I'm going to come to some of the things they've found in a minute. But they found a button, and they're like, there's a guy on a digger, and a guy with a shovel, and a guy with a metal detector, and a guy in like a little machine, and then this other guy who's found the coin is like, we've got a coin, and they're like, yes, and they're all like running over to him, and it's like, oh my god, like you don't even know what this is yet.
Yeah, no, but
and that was like season 6. We're on like season 10, I think now. It's amazing how much they can fit, how much they can drag this out.
Well, I think as well, a lot of it, because they've got such small windows, actually, a lot of it's naturally spread out. That's all they can do in that time for that season. They
do a lot of research. In fairness to them, despite their excitement, which is cute, but I mean, by this point, I'd be like, sure, okay, a coin. Unless it's a pile of gold coins, I'm not interested. But no, they are interested in all of it, and they genuinely look at the history of the things that they've found, and they go away and they do proper research, and like that is actually really cool. And it is a good TV show. It's not like you're watching it and getting angry. But it is also amazing how they've managed to make so much out of essentially so little.
Yeah, I really want them to find something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think that it doesn't matter if they find something or not.
Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no, but like...
No, I meant for them. Because I think that their enjoyment and the time they've spent with their own family and friends and just all the stupid stuff that they've done, like the holes they've dug, it's an amazing story. Even if they find nothing, they've spent their life doing something.
No, it is nice.
And the fact that it's a little bit silly makes it all the better.
Now, there is more complicated land registry going on as well. I should say that I think there was like 2 or 3 people that lived on the island when they bought it. And over time, the group has bought most of the shares or plots from other people. Dan Blankenship and his son David owned plots there too. They were actually both in the show. Unfortunately, Dan died in 2019. And his son, I believe, still lives there, but he's actually not on the show anymore. And I will say that Dan Blankenship he actually got involved in like 1967 as part of the Triton Alliance. So he had a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge as to what had happened there before. And he was like a great help. And he'd actually dived into one of the holes back in the day. So
wasn't it him that allegedly found the thingy tunnels?
Oh, I don't know. To be honest, I lost track of who's found what by this point. I don't think he found the tunnels because I think they were found long before 1967.
Okay.
But he had a lot of knowledge, obviously, having been on the island since then. You know, he's a great source of information.
He moved there to hunt it.
Yeah.
Right? That was why he was there. And yeah, credit to the amount of effort and energy these people have put in. And again, credit, because I've never found them acting like they know for certain anything.
No, they do get very excited about things that turn out to be nothing, but...
They are just looking for the truth, whatever that be. Like, they're not forcing anything.
Yeah, the narrator makes more of it than they do.
Yeah, like it's
when it
very
starts,
dramatised by the
yeah.
Discovery Channel.
Yeah, and also they do get a lot of like licensing issues and funding, which is not really an issue because first of all they've got a lot of money, and the History Channel, although the amount is undisclosed, they do get paid. Some people speculate quite a lot of money just for being on TV. So there's not really a funding issue anymore, but stuff like that does kind of come up to make, to give you the drama of the TV show and stuff. And it has been an issue in the past. For other companies, it was a real problem.
They've got the money. It's whether they're willing to spend it. It's whether they think it's worth spending that money. If it's
also licensing is still a problem. They do now have permission, so I can't believe it's it's their land, but apparently the state of Canada Canada still has to like give permission for you to bulldoze the whole thing or whatever. But they do have permission that if they find the treasure, they can keep 90% of it. I don't know why Canada gets to keep 10%.
That's pretty good. That it can be the other way around.
No,
so.
I know. So that's
well,
you'd
hope so with the amount of effort and lack of effort they've put into it,
and their own money.
Yeah, so, you'd hope that they get rewarded if they do find something. But again, I think they have the reward. I think that they've found a meaningful and enjoyable endeavour. It's just something to do. It's one of the most. It's a hobby that only a millionaire could have, but it is a great hobby. And to be able to share that, and who doesn't want to go? Like they're just living their childhood dream, and I think it is the most. I think that's what makes the show is just how adorable and harmless these people are.
Yeah. Well, you might be wondering why it's called the Curse of Oak Island. And that's because it's cursed, of course. Because what more do we need? Apparently, legend says that 7 men will die in the hunt for treasure before it's found. And 6 people have died so far, all in the 1800s. No one in these current owners' times. It was due to things like pump explosion, falling down the shaft, and sulphur fumes.
Yeah, a lot of people have died. I mean, they are doing dangerous things. So
it is
the chance of death is, especially back in the day, was extremely high.
Yeah.
But
I have watched episodes
again, that is still a lot of deaths in a very small space.
It is, and it is. I have watched an episode where they put someone down the hole, and it is like kind of frightening because if that hole suddenly caves in, there is like nothing they can do to get them back out.
The stakes are quite real, so there's a lot of measures you could go to really find the answers, but they do involve so much danger or money that. Because think how much money it is actually going to be to excavate an entire island. Well,
it's not even that. They're not allowed to bulldoze the whole thing because of licensing issues. So they can only do certain things at once.
Because they're on 6 deaths now. I'm waiting for the episode where Rick finally does a blood sacrifice of Marty to finally get the treasure.
Yeah, do you think that's the end, or do you think they turn on each other and one pushes the other down the shaft?
That would be another good dramatic ending. Either some sort of ceremony or just a fire in the. It has to be in the rain.
And they still don't get the treasure.
And he screams after doing it, and there's still no treasure. Anyway.
So I want to just talk about some other theories that have been sort of put out there about what's actually on the island, like what this treasure actually could be and who put it there. The obvious one is obviously the pirate treasure, as we mentioned right back at the beginning when we started this. And, there's still always the question as to like which pirate and when. And, like I say, Captain Kidd comes up the most. But I still think, having heard all of what we've heard now, I would be shocked if a pirate's gone to that much effort to hide his treasure. So, and if it was a pirate, it's sort of assumed to be gold.
Yeah, precious stones, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hope it's nothing perishable.
Yeah. It's all the trees, all the oak that they keep finding. Someone thought that would be worth something one day.
Or like really cheesy, there's just a guy that was like, people will really enjoy the hunt.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put anything down there, but there's just a note like, well done, you have completed my treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Here are 2 tokens that can be redeemed at reception.
Other people have also put forward that it could be treasures from the Spanish or Inca, Maya or Aztec cultures.
I doubt it's the Inca, Maya or Aztecs.
Yeah, so do I, but then a lot of this is unbelievable.
That's really, really out of their way. They'd be freezing in their little grass skirts.
Yeah. Over the years, other artefacts have been suggested as to what might be hidden there, such as the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. Now, I'm not going to go too deep on these ones because both of those things sort of kind of deserve their own episode, maybe one day. But I would say that there is next to no evidence that either of those things are on this island.
No,
like even more so than all the other stuff.
I think whenever you've got a missing treasure, the Ark of the Covenant always comes up.
So I feel like I'm not going to get too bogged down in those two things because it'll probably come up again when we cover those in future episodes. But I don't think. Have you got any reason to believe that they could be on the island?
Only a very, very, very slight Templar connection, and obviously the Templars are supposed to be the protectors of these items.
Well, I'm coming to them.
Oh, okay then. Then no, I have nothing to say on the matter.
No. Another theory is Marie Antoinette's jewels. Well, it would only be some of them because a lot of her things are on display in museums, but some stuff is missing. And apparently she entrusted them to a woman during the French Revolution who was later seen on the island. So I can see how, like, that's not so much of a stretch to come to. But again,
word of mouth.
who is burying it this far down?
Yeah, I don't see a woman
systems.
in her nice 1800s dress getting down and dirty and doing all that.
Especially in those days, like women did not like.
You'd be very noticed.
Yeah. Another popular one is Francis Bacon being the real author of William Shakespeare's work, and the real manuscripts are buried there.
I mean, yeah, okay, cool. I mean, if we're going to do this, then Amelia Earhart's could be there.
That's a good idea.
MHD 70's probably there.
Yeah, can you imagine?
This is all that people are doing, is any mystery that could be remotely related. They're just going, yeah, it could be this.
Well, apparently. So Francis Bacon was an English philosopher in Elizabethan England. He was a fairly important guy, but I don't know why they suddenly think that he's responsible for all of Shakespeare's work
again,
and then taking them all the way to Canada to bury.
I don't get the Canada thing, but I do think that might even be another episode because I think there is other reason to believe that Bacon was actually William Shakespeare or the writer of William Shakespeare.
Apparently he was interested in ciphers and codes and had land in Newfoundland, which is not all that far away from Oak Island.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no weight to these.
There's no weight to any of it, though, is there? Like, why is there more weight to the pirate theory?
There's none. I don't really subscribe to the pirate theory.
So, what do you subscribe to?
It wasn't something done like this. Wasn't something done in haste.
True. Okay. Well, I think before we get to what we believe, now's probably as good a time as any to talk about the Knights Templar.
Ooh, lads.
So some people theorise that they stashed all their valuable stuff there. And to be fair, I do think they were the sort of group who would make an elaborate system like this, or could make an elaborate system like this.
No, the thing with the Knights Templar is that they sort of live up to a lot of their legends with the way that they behave, like what they did, achieved, how they hid stuff, how they kept secrets, how they had spies, how they basically invented the bank.
Well, exactly. So don't you think it's possible that
they were as close to the Illuminati as you will ever find at one point. They ruled the world.
Yeah, they were super wealthy and super powerful. They need their own episode, very much so. So I'm not going to go too much into like what they did in that sense. But in terms of the island, King Philip ordered their arrest in 1307 and the Pope ordered their assets to be seized. So it does make sense that they would stash it somewhere.
They did. I don't know what points them towards Nova Scotia, but I have heard, listening to conspiracy theories about the Holy Grail and stuff, of some of them making it out of, I believe it was Jerusalem, and like getting the goods out and going. But then there's like places like Scotland, people believe they are, and
a lot of people think they fled to Scotland with a lot of their stuff,
and like Canada is just like across that water. They had the means and money to hide something, and if they did have something like the Holy Grail, not that we can decide what the Holy Grail is,
or even just treasure of their own.
They were just rich. But well,
the Knights Templar disbanded officially in the 1300s, and when I said that to you,
going.
Yeah, exactly. And they also get linked to the Freemasons after that, as you know. So, also, I have to say, there was a researcher on the show who claims to be a Freemason, and it wasn't very secret. Like, they went and looked through the archives of a local chapter.
They're not. The Freemasons aren't what people think they are.
That was very disappointing.
They are quite disappointing. They have like public records, and it is some of their stuff is secret, but they're not very secretive about it. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. But anyway, so even if they had have disbanded in the 1300s, or at least all split up, we don't know when they hid their stuff on the island. So it's not necessarily that they immediately went to Oak Island. They could have gone to Scotland, or indeed, apparently they did continue on in Portugal for quite some time because the authorities there didn't want to follow the same rules. So it's possible that they later moved their stuff to Oak Island, since apparently we didn't discover America until like the late 1400s, I think it was. It does seem a bit far-fetched that they went all the way to Nova Scotia in 1307.
Well, that's debatable. But let's not get into that debate. When America was first discovered I don't think you can discover a country that has humans living on it. You can discover an empty island, but it was already discovered because there was people there. Like the Native Americans didn't consider America discovered when we arrived. They weren't shit! There's a fucking country beneath us.
Yeah. So
the Templar is one of the only groups where there's even the tiniest amount of physical evidence of them being there.
Yeah. So the things they've found, the things that they've linked to the Knights Templar, first of all they found a coin. Well, I don't know. To be clear, what I'm about to speak about here is not necessarily in order. This is just a summary of some of the things that they've found that links to the Knights Templar. I thought one of the most important ones was the coin that they found.
Yeah.
There was a Knights Templar coin. It had the cross on it. And it's not one of these ones where you look at it and think, is it? It's clear. Like you can see it. You can make out what it is. And you have to wonder how that got there. Because some of this stuff you could argue, they find a lot of coins. And some of it you could very much argue came from previous treasure hunters and things like that. But I do think that is a bit mysterious.
Yeah, and that could either be something that was owned by the person that hid it or just part of the treasure. If you're not, what I mean? Like there's so many questions beyond questions with this that you never get a definitive answer. But I suppose that's what keeps the hunt going. The perpetual questions.
They do find a solid cross as well that was made from lead that they are sure was from the Knights Templar, and they dated that between 1200 and 1600.
Now, I know the reasoning behind this
what the reasoning behind the dating?
I know the reason behind their jumping from a lead cross to it being a Templar cross is that because there was this Templar connection, they went to an old Templar church in Spain or somewhere, and they looked at all the markings on the wall because obviously they were thinking they'd use similar markings if they were the ones hiding treasure.
Yeah.
And one of the markings was a cross. And if you look at this lead cross and then look at this carving of a cross, the similarity, because of how weird this cross is, because it's not just like two lines.
No, it's not completely.
It's got like a weird blob on the top with a circle, but the thing carved in the wall is exactly the same shape. It's a hell of a coincidence.
Yeah.
So that's what's led them. So to me, that's the only real bit of evidence putting someone on that island.
Well, I think that and the Knights coin.
Oh yeah, and like they're the only ones with any evidence that they were actually there.
Moving from one cross to another, next one I find a bit of a stretch. There was a guy called Nolan who lived on the island and discovered a big stone. He then found 4 other stones, and they made a perfectly symmetrical cross measuring 867 by 720 feet. So it's big. So you've got 5 symmetrical stones making up a cross. I'll put a picture on the blog. And they thought that it was a Knights Templar cross. And they dug down and found a 6th boulder that resembled a human head. And they're like, there's the eye, and the eye is probably looking towards something. So they're like, dig in that direction. And they also think it might be a more complicated set of stones buried underground that might represent the tree of life. And they have found some other stones that sort of like roughly put it into the same shape. But I mean, there's a lot of stones on this island. Is it that much of a stretch that 5 of them happen to be in a cross shape across 800 feet?
No, I never like stuff like this. You can make whatever pattern you like. It's too complicated. I'm all for digging a hole and having some directions to it, but there's a limit to how much you need to hide something once it's underground.
Plus, I feel like stones would move over time, especially the way that people have dug stuff up and moved stuff on this island.
Change shape, whatever, And logistically, think about having to line them all up, like how long it would take.
Yeah, especially like back in the day, you didn't have like laser finding.
No, there's ways they could do it, but it was all long, and
yeah.
I just can't imagine being asked.
So I just want to talk about some other stuff that has been found, not necessarily by the current team, but just over time that might be of interest. I mean, it's hard to know what's of interest and what's not. Obviously, you've got the early stuff, the so-called 90-foot stone. As I mentioned earlier, they did think they'd found it on the Curse of Oak Island show, but it's just a flat stone with maybe some initials on the top and none of the pieces of like the code or anything on there. So, I mean, I'm not even sure we found that. I don't even know if I can agree that we found that.
Well, it does lie with the story that the stone was beaten, and if I remember rightly, there is parts where they think they can make out some symbols.
There is, but then
it's not it's not completely smooth. There is reason for them to think it might be the stone.
Well, it might be. I do agree with that, but it means nothing, even if it is the stone, because the code has gone.
Well, it verifies that the original story, which I think a lot of treasure hunting is about verifying the story, and about because it's expensive to dig, so you don't want to just go around digging holes
like
willy-nilly.
Aimlessly. Yeah,
you want a reason for everything that you're doing. So, if you can legitimize stuff, then you can go to people and say, "Look, this is legitimate. Can I have some funding, please?" And it's all part of it. Is it won't help you find the treasure, but it keeps you in the hunt.
So they've also found a piece of leather or sheepskin that had either UI, VI, or WI on it. And there's been a lot of talk about a piece of parchment that was found in a small box. This was not the current team. This was way back in the day. But most people tend to think that actually might have been faked in the 1800s to try and entice investors. Like what I said earlier, funding used to be an issue. So again, I wouldn't put too much into that. They also found what's often described as a gold chain, but it's actually 3 links. And now they think it was actually probably from some sort of military uniform. Still interesting, especially if some of this stuff was found like and is genuinely old and not from current hunters, previous hunters.
Yeah, and what's cool is I think is that again they do employ historians.
Yeah,
they even have a local historian that's on the show quite a bit. So they are making an effort to do this in a somewhat correct way. And they've actually built a really cute little museum where anything that they've either found or can get their hands on that's an artifact from the island, you can go and have a little look at. So you can visit. You can travel and go and see that Templar cross if you really want to. But I really do want to. I'd love to go to the island.
You said it was closed at the moment. Is that because it's winter? Okay, I don't know.
But
anyway, yeah, but you
can
can visit.
The seasons in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, but you can visit. That they do tours. I don't think you can just show up, but yes, you can book a tour. Now, quite excitingly, or at least I was when I first saw it, the current Oak Island crew found a hinge. So it was like a piece of folding metal with the holes, exactly what you imagine like a door hinge to look like, and they thought that it might be the hinge from a treasure chest.
Yeah, I remember this because their logic was, well, treasure chest needs hinge.
Yeah, and it's quite big actually. So it's like be a big old chest. Oh
yeah, it was it wasn't something bought from your local DIY store. It was definitely older.
It's definitely a hinge.
It was definitely like handmade metal, big, thick.
And it was an interesting find, but they also think it could have been repurposed for use on a boat. And this was in an area where they started to find quite a lot of boat-based bits. So, and it's possible that over the years boats have like crashed and stuff like that, and, bits have washed up and gotten buried. So it's not all that unbelievable that you find a lot of boat stuff. But I don't know. I thought that one was quite cool.
I think it's cool, and do you think that their endeavours are never going to be for nothing, because along the way they're uncovering small bits of history.
Yeah,
and not to be too twee, but that sort of the value there is priceless.
No, it is cool. I mean, I found that interesting. They also found a key cover plate. It was like this ornate kind of lock cover that they then theorised that the skeleton key, which Fred Nolan found and he gave to Rick Lagina, they thought that the key might have fit into the lock. So, but a key, a lock, a treasure chest. I mean, that's all kind of cool. I can see why you'd get excited about this.
No, and again, this island has a very interesting past. So, with all the legends and stuff, I can see why people get so caught up in it.
They have found a lot of like military buttons and other types of buttons all around the 17th century. They've found a number of coins, including coins from Britannica coins with King Charles II on them. And they think one coin that actually says 1771. But I actually personally don't see the numbers. To me, it just looks like a bit of metal. But, they're sure. And they're the coin experts, I guess. They've found a lot. Too many to list. a lot of bits of metal and coins and things that shouldn't be there naturally. It is interesting, and there is a list that I'll put a link in the blog. There is a list that they're keeping of all the things that have been found if you want to get that into it. They find things like a spike with a metal rod, and it looks like it might be an arrowhead. They thought this was from a crossbow bolt from the 1700s, but someone else, another historian, not just some random guy, thought it came from the Romans. So, I mean, I don't know how they would have got it there.
Yeah, there's so much opinion wrapped up in this as well. Treacherous water, because I don't think you'll ever find the truth, as it were. I think you'll only, there's so much of it that's all old wives' tales and hearsay.
It is, yeah. Yeah, they find like some cute things. They find a little brooch with a little gemstone at some point, which they date back to between 1500 and 1600. So that's cool. I think the biggest problem for me is that I really struggle, and I know they do struggle with it, but I think they should probably struggle with it a bit more, is trying to figure out stuff that was there from people that lived there and other hunters and stuff that actually means anything to the hunt that they're doing. And I'll give you an example. In season 4, they actually bury a piece of glass that's got someone's ashes in it. It's one of the McInnes descendants. And they bury that on what used to be the McInnes lot. Now, that's nice. That's a nice memory. But I wonder if in 50 or 100 years, someone else is going to dig that up and wonder what on earth they've found.
Yeah, it's a highly contaminated search area.
So
it's really difficult, and the search has gone for so long. One thing I'm learning is people back in the day could make the hell out of a brass button, but couldn't sew it onto a uniform for shit.
Yeah, it just fell off all over the shop.
Just ping, ping, ping.
But like I said earlier, I think 100 years ago, there's no way they'd be expecting people to still be looking for it. So I guess they weren't that careful.
No, and currently we're not being that careful, as you said.
As I say, I'll put a link to a list on the blog for all the other bits they've found. But to be honest, I think that's kind of really all the interesting stuff. Have you got any other bits that you remember them finding that you were interested in?
No, it's all tiny little things that are. It's all intrigue.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's got so many seasons, because it's all like, oh, that could be Roman. What the? Like, it's all like, It's just twists and turns. It's just, and yeah, I think them all being cute old men really helps with it.
There is 2 more things I just briefly want to talk about. The one being Samuel Ball, who you mentioned earlier. He was a former slave who took up an offer of serving in the British Navy and was then offered some land, and he purchased a lot on Oak Island in 1790. He paid £8 for the lot next to the Smith family. This was considered quite a lot of money then, and people were already curious as to how he got so much money.
Yeah, I imagine things like a black man.
Yeah. So,
was said.
Yeah. I imagine you can imagine kind of in what would have been such a small community as well, the gossip. I wonder where he gets all his money from. What's he doing? Kind of like the old age.
Yeah, I'm sure there would be some
gossip.
slang words that I don't want to repeat used.
No.
Yeah, I'm sure a landowner with coloured skin would have shocked them.
Yeah, I mean, he purchased it in 1790, so we're going back a long time. But he did live there for a long time. And a lot of bits, coins and bits of lead, a copper ring, things like that have been found on his lot, like they've done, or what was his lot. And people have speculated, and I find this particularly interesting, did he find the treasure already?
It's a possibility, but we've no evidence of that.
We've no evidence of any of it.
Other than he was pretty damn rich. I mean, if you did find it, a pretty good cover is to either act like you didn't find it or start a legend, and then start a legend, getting people to look for it still.
Well, apparently there was an article written by a judge in the 1800s keeping a record of this, and he listed Ball as one of the original discoverers of the money pit. And apparently it was later changed. So people have speculated, like, was this really an accident, or did he pay off the judge to say, whoops, we've made a mistake, so that no one knew that he had already found the treasure? So it is interesting, and the amount of stuff they find on what was his lot as well is, it's interesting.
I mean, again, they do look a lot in that specific place, so they are going to find more there. But it's an intriguing. It's one of the more down to earth parts of the story, and
it's an interesting bit of history.
It's and it's the bit of history they can actually prove, and there's a chance that ring was worn by him, and it makes it all more tangible.
I just want to briefly talk about Vikings.
Ugh.
When I first saw Vikings, I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I don't know how we're going to fit all of this into even 5 hours. I was like, there's so many things to talk about, including the moon. The moon came into it at one point, and I have chosen to cut that out. If you're interested, read the blog. But Vikings, I found I couldn't avoid after a while, because I started to see theories, multiple theories, about Viking ships. Now, Vikings, they made a good ship. So it is possible that they sailed to Oak Island.
There's a lot of debate whether they were the ones that found America first.
But exactly. So it's entirely possible that they sailed to Oak Island. Some people have said there's theories about the entire island being like some problematic sinkhole, and that at some point a sinkhole might have entirely sunk a Viking ship or ships, and that might be what's buried under Oak Island, and that's why they keep finding all this stuff, but nothing treasure based.
I like that. I like that theory. It also explains like everything flooding, because the fluid be what would be causing the sinking.
Yeah.
So I like that. I don't know why it has to be Vikings, but I do like the idea of the stuff they're finding is some sort of remnant of some natural disaster combined with human habitation.
Well, they did like seismic scanning, I think it's called, to like see what's under the ground. And they did that in the swamp, which is a big deal on the show if you watch it. And they find what they described as a ship-shaped anomaly under the swamp. They haven't made it to this ship-shaped anomaly yet. And they found a pathway, which they have dug out, of like stones sort of cobbled. So they found a lot of other boat bits around that area too. So again, the theory is that a boat might be under there. That might be a Viking boat.
I don't know why you'd have a cobbled boat, a cobbled path leading to a boat, but
that they might have been there. They might have lived there or stayed there.
Why is the boat not in the water?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I suppose they could have been building it.
Crash.
They could have been building the boat, I suppose.
Yeah,
or whatever.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those like they're real cock teasers because they'll be like, right, we found this boat shaped thing beneath the swamp.
They won't talk about it again.
Nothing we can do about that, so we'll have to leave it there. We have found a path nearby, a bit we could dig out, but yeah, we can't dig up the swamp, so we don't know. Next thing, right, let's dig a hole over here.
Yeah, they do jump about a lot, which is frustrating. I feel like focus on one thing once and then move on.
They don't choose the editing. I'm sure they do focus on one thing and move on.
Well, at the end of each season, they do like summarise what they've found and they make a plan for the next season, which is kind of nice. But I haven't watched all 140 episodes. I've sort of watched bits from
I'd say I've watched
seasons,
about 100.
But you've watched most, haven't you?
The newer seasons, I kind of got a bit like, how many times can they drill a hole? Find some wood. Like, I've seen so many core samples, it's unreal.
Is there anything else you want to talk about that I haven't brought up before we talk about what we think is there?
Yeah, unlike a lot of our things, this is a huge, huge subject.
Yeah, and I wasn't really expecting it to be quite so big,
or interesting.
It is interesting, actually.
I know you're going into it a little bit like, well, this is stupid.
I still feel like it's a bit stupid.
Yeah, but it's
it is still
gloriously
interesting.
Stupid.
I like history as well, which I think really helped. Like, I am interested in history, so even if there is no treasure there, I do enjoy all the things that they've found and thinking about what people might have been doing at the time when those things got lost. So let's have it. So, do you think there's treasure on this island?
No.
You don't think there's anything, not necessarily pirate treasure, you don't think any of the theories we've had, there's not something that someone deliberately buried on this island?
Well, okay, that's pretty broad.
No, you know what I mean, though, like back when this started, like when the legend began.
No, I don't think there was anything, really like legend worthy that's buried there. I think there's a very nice legend and a tale and it's just gone passed down from generation to generation and created this life of its own. But no, I don't think there's any treasure there.
I don't think there is, but I would like to believe there is.
I don't think it matters whether there's treasure there or not. Because apart from the ones that unfortunately lost their lives too early, I think that I think the hunt is the main thing here. I don't think that, like, especially Laginas, I don't think that, even if they find treasure, I don't think they'll break even at this point.
No,
I really think that being part of the legend and just doing it, I think, is the real treasure. So yeah, there is a treasure on that island. And
I did look that up actually about the money and stuff. A lot of people have like speculated about how much the History Channel are paying and how much money other people over the years have spent. It's largely undocumented and undisclosed. But some people reckon it could be upwards just in the recent times of 10 million.
Yeah, oh yeah, serious money. But they've got serious money. It's not a problem.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, even if they find the 2 million, it's not going to cover the costs.
Well, no, that was 2 million back then. Would be a hell of a lot more now. But no, I don't. A lot of these people, I think, may have started in it for the money, but there becomes this passion. I think people may have started for the money, but there becomes this passion that takes over, and then it's just about the hunt. It's about not knowing. It's about, because every time you stop digging and go, no, there's nothing here, it could also just be the next hole.
Yeah. Yeah, it could literally just be like a metre to the right.
It's always one more hole and you're done.
Yeah.
So I can see how people get stuck on it. And
I do think as well, it's, if you put this much effort into trying to uncover something in an area, so this is, like 140 odd acres, I think I said, didn't I? If you focused your efforts on another area of 140 acres, you'd find shit there too.
Oh, totally. And yeah, I think that they're doing a good job. They're finding some historical items. They're not doing any harm.
In 1849, supposedly one of the workers was seen pocketing something from the end of a large drill. So people do sort of think, well, has it all just been stolen over the years? Has whatever's there just been slowly taken and not documented? And that I could believe. I do believe it's possible that a pirate stashed his treasure on this island, not necessarily in this like vault 100 metres into the ground with a elegant flood system, but he could have literally just dug a small hole, stashed his treasure. Someone, for example, such as Samuel Ball, could have come along, found the shallow hole, took his treasure, and then all of a sudden this massive legend carries on and Samuel's like, oh, it's all in my living room. It could have come from something and transformed into this giant legend.
I do think, yeah, you're right. If there is a treasure, it's just the origin of this story. It isn't as elaborate. It has been found. It's long gone. It's not on the island anymore. And it was just in a hole. And then this legend has built up around it and people have just gone hunting for it. And yeah, it's a craziness. It's a madness. It's an obsession, but it's a beautiful one. It's a harmless one. And I'm all for it.
To end this episode, I was just going to give you a brief list of all the things that we found and know about. But instead, I decided to tell you all the things we don't know. For example, we don't know where the original money pit is. We don't know if the box drains exist. And if they do, we don't know where they are. We don't know where the stone is, whether it's real or what is said on the stone. And we don't know whether there ever was any treasure or whether any of it is left and whether any of this has meant anything. So, thank you for listening. In summary, we don't know a lot and we don't think there's treasure on Oak Island. But if you are interested, which I wouldn't blame you, it is a super interesting topic. There will be some images on this week's blog, as I say, lots of links where you can find out a bit more information and things we haven't covered. And also, there's over 140 episodes of The Oak Island Show, if that's what you want to watch. There is a link in the show notes to the blog and to our Instagram page. And you can also email us if you want to at hello@mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. And we will be back next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.